Welcome back, everyone. This is your friend, Dr. James. It is so good to have you with us today. If you've been following along, you know we've been on a bit of a journey through the attributes of God. We've unpacked the sovereignty of God. We've looked deep into the will of God, and we've explained why we believe the grace view really stands out as the preferable option there. But today we are turning a new page. We are starting a brand new four-part series on a topic that has kept theologians up at night for centuries, the foreknowledge of God. Now, before we dive in, I want to give credit where it is absolutely due. The content we are covering in this series is heavily drawn from the work of Dr. Ken Wilson. So, my goal here is to be your guide. I want to take those heavy nuggets of truth, simplify them, and help us really get our heads around what's happening here. So, in this series, we're going to look at four distinct views: Open Theism, Simple Foreknowledge, Middle Knowledge, and the Augustinian Calvinist view. But for this episode, part 1, we need to lay the groundwork. We're going to look at how the Bible actually uses the word foreknowledge, how it relates to election, and then we are going to tackle that first controversial view, Open Theism. So let's start with the text. When we see the word foreknowledge in our Bibles, what are we actually looking at? The Greek word here is Proginōskō. It's a compound word, ginosko, to know, and pro, beforehand. It literally means to know beforehand. Now, this word shows up 5 times in the New Testament, and this is crucial. It's not just used for God, it's used for humans too. Take Acts 26. Paul is speaking, and he says, "The Jews foreknew me, they knew me beforehand for a long time." Or jump to the end of the Bible, 2 Peter 3:17. Peter says to his readers, "Since you knew beforehand, beware." He's saying, guys, I already told you this. You have prior knowledge. In these cases, is this some mystical, divine predetermination? No, it's just people knowing something before it happens. But of course, the word is used of God too. Romans 8:29, for whom he foreknew, he also predestined. Romans 11:2, God has not cast away his people whom he foreknew. And 1 Peter 1:2, which we'll come back to, talks about being elect according to the foreknowledge of God. Here is where the controversy starts. If you look at a lexicon like Bidag, Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Gingrich, which is kind of the gold standard for Greek definitions, they define Prognoskō as to know beforehand. But then they add a second definition, to choose beforehand. And guess which verses they list under choose? The ones about God. Romans 8, Romans 11, 1 Peter 1. Now you have to ask yourself, is there an objective, linguistic reason to change the definition from know to choose just because God is the subject? Or is that theology driving the dictionary? Because there are no extra biblical references in all of Greek literature where Proginōskō means to choose. It always means to know. If you read choose into it, you are bringing your theological bias to the table. Let's look at the noun form, prognosis. Sound familiar? We use it in medicine. If a doctor gives you a prognosis, they are telling you the expected future outcome of an illness. This word appears twice in Scripture. Acts 2:23. Jesus was delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. And 1 Peter 1:20. Christ was foreknown before the foundation of the world. Again, some scholars want to say this implies predetermination. But think about the medical analogy. If a doctor gives you a poor prognosis, did the doctor predetermine your death? Did he cause it? No. He just had prior knowledge. He looked at the data and said, if this, then that. Predetermination is a biased reading of the word. The text says, according to foreknowledge, not according to predetermination. This leads us right to the sticky topic of election and justification. 1 Peter 1:2 is the classic text here. Elect according to the foreknowledge of God. What does that mean? It means we are chosen in accordance with what God knew beforehand. Now, there are 3 main ways people interpret this. 1, the Calvinist view, despite foreknowledge. They would argue that God chose us despite his foreknowledge. In their view, the Stoic or Augustinian view, God makes a decree first. He determines everything that will happen, and because he determined it, he knows it. Basically, if he didn't decree it, he wouldn't know it. So, foreknowledge is just a result of his decree. 2. The Arminian early church view, basis of foreknowledge. This view says foreknowledge was instrumental. God used his foreknowledge of future human choices to make his decision. This was the view of the early church fathers, guys who spoke Greek as their first language. They read 1 Peter 1:2 and said, "Oh, God chose based on what he knew beforehand." 3. The according to view, Geisler. This is a bit more nuanced. Some, like Norman Geisler, argue that foreknowledge is anthropomorphic. Since God is outside of time, he is eternal, seeing past, present, and future all at once, he doesn't really foreknow anything in sequence. He just knows, so the word is a human term for a divine reality. I find it interesting to look at how biased the lexicons can be here. In 1 Peter 1:2, BDAG is vague about what according to means. But in the very next verse, 1 Peter 1:3, it says, God saved us according to his great mercy. There, they admit it means on the basis of. So why is verse 3 on the basis of, but verse 2 is a mystery? I'd suggest it's bias. If we are consistent, we were elect on the basis of the foreknowledge of God. All right, so that's the definition. Now let's jump into the first of the four major views Dr. Wilson covers, Open Theism. This is a fascinating and somewhat modern take. The big idea in Open Theism is that God does not know all future events. He knows some, but not all. One of the main proponents here is Greg Boyd. Boyd looks at scripture passages where God seems to express regret or surprise or frustration. He looks at times where God seems to change his mind or test people to see what is in their hearts. Boyd concludes that if God is surprised, he couldn't have known for sure what was going to happen. Boyd argues that God knows reality, but the future isn't real yet. So God knows generalities, but not specifics. He knows the it, but not the how. For example, Boyd might say, God determines and foreknows that a specific event will happen, but he doesn't determine or foreknow every little detail surrounding it. He knows I'm going to pick up this cup, but he doesn't know if I'll use my thumb or my whole hand. Now here is where Dr. Wilson points out a critical error in open theism. Boyd assumes that to know something beforehand, God must determine it beforehand. Do you see that? It's actually the same error the Calvinists make, just applied differently. Boyd thinks if God knows it, it's fixed. If it's fixed, it's determined. I don't want it to be determined, so God must not know it. He conflates knowing with causing. Why does he do this? What's the motivation? Honestly, it's a worthy goal. Open theists want to get God off the hook for evil. They want to avoid fatalism. If God predetermined everything, then God becomes the author of evil. He becomes the cause of genocide, of rape, of suffering. Boyd says, no way. He wants to preserve human freedom and God's goodness. He argues that if the future is partly open, then God isn't a micromanager who scripted your sin. He's a relational God who responds to us, who interacts with the unfolding drama of history. And I get that. We should combat the idea that God is the author of evil. We should believe that prayer matters and isn't just a script. However, while the goal is noble, the solution is problematic. You don't have to destroy God's omniscience to save his goodness. Scripture is pretty clear. Isaiah 46, I am God, declaring the end from the beginning. God knows the future. The real issue isn't what God knows, it's what God decrees. We can say God does not decree all future events without saying he doesn't know them. Dr. Wilson uses a great analogy here to debunk the idea that foreknowledge equals causation. Imagine I'm holding a heavy book in the air. If I let go of this book, what's going to happen? It's going to hit the table. Gravity works. I know that with 100% certainty. I have absolute foreknowledge of that future event. Now, when the book hits the table, did my knowledge cause it to hit the table? No. Gravity caused it. My letting go caused it. My knowing it was just knowing. Or take a car accident. Imagine you are driving and you see a reckless driver speeding, weaving in and out, and you see another car pulling out blindly up ahead. You say to your family, that guy is going to hit him. 10 seconds later, bam. It happens. You had foreknowledge, you knew it was inevitable. But did you cause the wreck? If you tell the police what you saw, are they going to arrest you for causing the accident with your mind? Of course not. Foreknowledge is not causative, and that is the key takeaway for today. We don't need to embrace open theism and deny that God knows the future just to protect human freedom. We just need to separate knowing from causing. So open theism, it swings the pendulum too far. Next time, in part 2 of this series, we are going to look at the second view, simple foreknowledge. It's a step up, but does it solve the puzzle? You'll have to tune in to find out. Thanks for listening, and remember, truth without grace is harsh, but grace without truth is shallow. Let's aim for both. If you like this video, please share and subscribe. See you next time. God bless.